Good morning. Welcome to episode number 2 of the Morning Pitstop. And I felt like I would go off script a little bit here and tell you why I'm doing this, actually. I love cars. And I grew up around cars. I'm a mechanical guy. And by the way, I'm looking up at my clock. It's 5:37 a.m. I'm committed to this. I get bringing you all some fun updates every day. On the auto industry. So I love cars, right? Cars, boats, motorcycles. I've loved it all. I've done it all. And I've always wanted to do a podcast that was just kind of fun and quick and informative for people, but I never knew what I wanted to lean into. And because there's so many car tubers out there and YouTubers out there doing car stuff. And I felt like, I'd just be another person, and I may be. I mean, there may be like 2 people that watch this shit, and whatever, right? But at least I'm doing it. So 2 days ago, I have a sales job in a real life outside of this, and I do other things. But I said, when do I have time to actually do this? And I'm an early riser. And I thought, for the 1 or 2 hours that I spend in the morning kind of waking up and getting my act together before I do my normal day job, I'm in sales. And I thought maybe I could contribute a little bit. And so that's how this podcast came about. So 2 days ago, I decided to do it. I figured out some logos. I figured out, the Morning Pitstop. Luckily, the name wasn't taken anywhere, which was surprising to me. And I decided to go for it. Now, at 56 years old, you got to be a fast learner at this stuff. New software, new everything. And that was always a barrier for me. I always felt like, oh man, this stuff looks really hard. But then I saw guys like Tyler Hoover, Doug DeMuro, the channel That Dude in Blue, and, their channels aren't highly overproduced, I mean, I'm going to include some pictures and do some different things once I get used to this software here, but, it's not that complicated. And I figured if you be yourself and people lean into that and people like it, then then so be it, okay? But if you don't like it, you can change the channel. You could go watch other people. Vice Grip Garage is another one that I love, and Derek. And those guys just were honest people from the very beginning. Same thing with DeMuro and Doug and all of these guys. So I figured I'm going to give this a shot. It's not going to be easy. I have a busy life, and I figured I'll just do this in the morning. There'll be mornings like next week. I'm not in my home office. Will there be times where I step outside from here? Of course. I think being in this work office is kind of boring, honestly. And so I'm going to get some equipment and do some things. Maybe I'll just use my phone and record I'm using Riverside software, but maybe I'll do that. I don't know. So, but I want to bring this to you guys. I think I've always had a mentoring type of attitude, or helping others kind of thing. And I figure if I can give 5 stories a day to all of you, you could go off to work, you could go off with your buddies, because maybe your buddies like cars. And you could say, hey, I heard on the Morning Pit Stop that, the new Tundra, well, not the new Tundra, but the Tundra that we make here in the United States is actually being sold in Japan. Flip in the script, right? And that's pretty fun. And some other things, like yesterday I did my first episode and I really leaned into the Hyundai Boulder. And man, I think that's such a great, Hyundai and Kia, whether you think they're just a high volume, cheap manufacturer or whatever, we all remember the old Hyundai. So, Hyundai from the 90s. And look at how far they've come. And I think that's pretty cool. So all of this. And so I'm going to keep this up, 5 a.m., puffy eyes. This isn't a beauty contest, I think. So, and I'm not really a hat guy, but boy, I gotta, figure that whole process out, right? But I'm wearing a hat today. Happy Friday. So that's why I'm doing what I do. I love this. I've just been a car enthusiast and a car spotter and a unique car guy, like the Mitsubishi Starion. Anybody even remember that car? And quirky stuff like that, the 3000 GT. So yeah, so I'm here for all this. I'm going to just see how this whole thing goes. So let's get this morning's podcast started. I'm going to take a drink of coffee here and then we'll go through the 5. Okay. I'm from the Pacific Northwest. It rains here constantly and it makes these mornings even harder, right? But okay. So if you didn't know, I do some deep research on the top 5 news stories or automotive news stories every day. And then I I do like 10. And then I sift through those ones and I figure out which the 5 would be most interesting maybe to you all. And so I have a little prompter. You'll see me looking down. Maybe some mornings I might have some paper sheets or whatever. Still figuring that, but I'm not memorizing these 5 in 5 minutes. So I'm looking a little bit. You'll see me looking down. It's part of this natural learning process, right? I don't have time to like memorize them and look into the camera and be like super perfect, right? I just want to bring you the stories. Okay. So got some weird ones this morning. Here's the top 5 of the day, episode 2. All right. Toyota, the world's biggest car maker, is sending the, Texas-sized trucks. We call them the big trucks that Toyota makes. Toyota is sending these trucks to Japan, which is going to be interesting, and I'll talk a little more about that. And the high-tech dream of the Sony Honda EV relationship. We've all been hearing about it. It hit a brick wall. And I don't remember how many millions and millions. I think it was 800 million, something like that. This Sony relationship with Honda's gone sour. EVs, right? And then, so we're calling this Toyota thing a reverse export. The Honda EV relationship with Sony hits a wall. The Beijing Auto Show is kicking off today. We're calling it the April offensive. I think some people are calling it, with chargers that fill a battery most of the way in 5 minutes. And then Subaru, people were laughing a little bit about an electric Subaru in the wilderness, but they're bringing the wilderness out in a hybrid form. And then the last story will be the March sales data, which I mentioned yesterday, confirms that the old guard still has some fight left. So here's the last 24 hours. So let's get going. So let's talk about the Texas Tundra, right? The Texas Tundra goes to Tokyo. So our lead story, the most fun story here, is the fascinating flip in global trade. For decades, we've seen Toyota ship cars here, ships full of Japanese cars arriving in Seattle here and Los Angeles. And now those cars are headed the other way. So Toyota has begun officially selling the Highlander and the Tundra that are made here in America in Japan. That's really crazy. And these aren't the re-engineered micro versions or anything else for Japan. These are full size. These trucks are 20 feet long, built in Texas and Indiana. And a Tundra will set you back 12 million yen. I don't even convert that. I imagine it's pretty dang expensive though. But yeah, a 20-foot long vehicle in Japan navigating the narrow streets of Nagoya, for example, or Shibuya, or Tachikawa. But here's the thing, for years, and I used to travel to Japan, for years, the Japanese culture loved, for example, in the 90s, Levi's, right? Levi's and Marlboro and the cowboy thing, right? And so Americana in Japan plays, right? It plays. And so I would imagine this test of sending these American vehicles over to Japan might play out pretty well because of that kind of American lifestyle aesthetic. And I think it's a brilliant move. Why? Because things are slow here for Toyota. We talked about it yesterday. So while things are slow and factories here have capacity to produce vehicles, let's get them over there. And it'll keep those factories running and keep America healthy, right? And so we'll see how that whole thing plays out. And then in story number 2, and we talked about yesterday, and we've heard about it this week, Chinese EVs and what the EU is doing to try to protect themselves. We're calling this the 5-minute charge. At the Beijing Auto Show, which just opened today, they're 17 hours ahead, but today, they also call it Auto China 2026. Those doors just opened, and the specs coming off the floor for EVs are staggering. Multiple brands led by, I guess it's Xpeng and Zeekr, have debuted a 900-volt architecture and what they call 5C charging. We're talking about adding 400 kilometers, which is around 250 miles of range in 10 minutes. Xpeng's they're calling it the new Mona MO3, is promising parking space to parking space, full autonomy, $17,000 US. $17,000. I mean, that will core out EV sales here if that happens. And I think people are very wary of these Chinese EVs and what it'll do to the markets here. So why this matters is here in America, we're still arguing about charger reliability. And here in the Pacific Northwest, there's a lot of electric cars. There's a lot of Teslas, and charging is a pain in the butt. Stations can get full. And also They're hard to integrate with, and a lot of them don't integrate with certain models. And we're still arguing about that here. The East the East, being China, has turned charging into a pit stop. It's faster than a bathroom break. Imagine parking your car, plugging it in, going and getting a Starbucks coffee, and then coming out and getting 200 miles of range for that 10 minutes of time. It's widening. The gap is widening between Chinese battery manufacturers and battery technologies and everybody else. So it's crazy. Story number 3, and I talked about it in the beginning, Honda, Sony, we're calling that the Afeela project, and we've seen this over the last week or so. I saw it on Doug DeMuro's podcast, and they were talking about this too. We've all been tracking the Sony Honda Afeela project for quite a few years now, but it looks like the music's finally stopped. Get it, Sony? Sony Honda Mobility has officially announced they're ending development and sales plans for the Afeela EV project, and this is part of the EV backblast, right? That we're all seeing, the kickback, and they're calling it quits. I think it was something like, don't quote me on this, but I think it was like $800 million down the tubes. Can you imagine almost $1 billion writing it off? Massive, and here's the reason, the massive capital requirements and what they're calling the EV winter has been, we've all been talking about. So Honda read the tea leaves, man, and they're pivoting back to its hybrid roots. And Sony is going to go back to focusing on in-car entertainment software for all the OEMs, right? So, building a car and developing a car is millions and billions of dollars for just a new model, right? And then the new architecture and all of that makes it even more difficult. Just ask Apple. And I'm not an Apple fan, sorry, but I'm not. You can have all the best screens and all the best technical people, but if you can't make the mechanicals work, you're going to get sliced and diced by reviewers and the consumers, and it's a volatile market, especially in EV. So you're building essentially an expensive tablet or mobile phone on wheels, and that's where things ended up, and people are just not here for it, I don't think, right now. So the EV winters is definitely afoot. Story number 4. Okay, Subaru. I'm a lover of Subaru. I had a 2009 Subaru WRX hatchback. I'm not a WRX sedan guy. I'm a hatch guy, 100%. I love Subarus. My son's got a Subaru Outback. That thing won't die. And I have an Impreza in the driveway, another one that my wife drives. And so I'm a Subaru aficionado. I like Subarus. And back in New York at the New York Auto Show, Subaru introduced a couple of different vehicles. We've seen already their EV, their off-road electric vehicle. Don't know how that's going to work, but they leaned in on the hybrid, and now they have their Wilderness model, which is actually one of their most popular models as a hybrid. And so at the New York International Auto Show, they showed these two cars. They unveiled the Subaru Getaway, which is the all-electric SUV built on a joint platform with Toyota, and then the Forester Wilderness Hybrid. And, it's funny, the Forester is actually a big car. I compared it to a Hyundai. I saw a Forester and a Hyundai Santa Fe, an older Santa Fe, and actually the Forester is bigger than the what was then a mid-size Hyundai Santa Fe. So it's kind of interesting how the Forester has grown in size. I think it goes for all vehicles, but so they'll have a Forester Wilderness Hybrid. It's a big deal for Subaru. Subaru has trailed in their electrification, their hybrids, and their fully EV introductions, and they're a little bit behind. And that's to say that their horizontal motors, their 4-cylinder horizontal configuration isn't very fuel efficient, by the way. So they've been the ones that really need a hybrid model to increase MPG, right? So Subaru now is just admitting the market isn't ready for a 100% EV lineup, especially in the 4-wheel, let's go off-road kind of thing. But by bringing the Wilderness trim, which is their bread and butter, bringing hybrid powertrains to the Wilderness is probably a great idea. And it's kind of giving their outdoorsy, more environmental demographic for Subaru what they're looking for. And, I really think that Wilderness is their strongest asset because of kind of their brand character and things. And then story 5, we're going to lean into what I talked about yesterday, which is the March slide survival guide. So the full Q1 numbers are starting to trickle in even more. While Honda and Subaru saw double-digit slides in March, the Toyota 4Runner and Tundra are still seeing some growth. I talked about it yesterday. Truck-based vehicles are defying the sales gravity that's pulling down certainly EVs, compact EVs, and sedans. I mean, there's talk, and we were talking about it. I was listening to that on DeMuro's podcast last week. People are talking about how sedans are going away. Like, if you're going to find a sedan, Accord, Camry, good luck. I think those are survivors. But I mean, pick a sedan that's popular right now. Not even popular right now. Pick a sedan that you'd want to drive versus a compact SUV or, full-size SUV, right? So, it clearly shows that Americans want to feel like they could go off-road, feel they have the utility. We want to feel like 100% of the time that we're going camping at any moment, or that we can go off-road at any moment. We're going to pack our dogs and our tents in our trucks and our SUVs. So to wrap up the top 5, Texas trucks are headed to Japan. China has perfected 5-minute charging. Sony is now out of the car business, and the Subaru Hybrid and the 4Runner are still king of the hill. That's the Morning Pit Stop. That is why I'm doing all of this here at the Morning Pit Stop every morning. So if you're enjoying all of this, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button. These podcasts are going to get better. I'm getting better at this. I think a goal of mine would be by episode 10, great music, great imagery, pictures of the trucks and cars that I'm talking about, and away we go. So why don't you go with me, or come along with me on this trip of learning how to do podcasting, learning how to do all this while providing you guys with the 5 best pieces of automotive industry news every morning. Maybe exception of Saturday and Sunday, but we'll see. But anyways, I'd love for you to subscribe, tell a friend, and I'll see you back on Monday.